the events assistant here. This evening, I'm so pleased to welcome Dr. Michio Kaku to discuss his new book, Future of the Mind. Last week, it was a #1 bestseller, and now here you all are getting to hear about it. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with his previous books, which include Hyperspace, Beyond Einstein, Physics of the Impossible, and Physics of the Future. And so in his latest work, Dr. Kaku, who is, in case you missed it, anyone, is a co-founder of string theory, he has brought us an accessible way to learn about the latest research being done about the brain, which has long been one of the most complicated mysteries we know of. Through his expertise as a physicist, he's able to show us what technology could have in store for us in the future, and the enthusiasm he writes with really is infectious. The scope of the book is truly amazing. It takes us through mysteries of consciousness, of thought, of memories, and of dreams, while never leaving us lost in the jargon, which I personally appreciated a lot. So we are truly honored to have Dr. Kaku here with us tonight to share his new book. Please help me welcome him to Politics and Prose.
Well, after such a great introduction, I can't wait to hear the speaker myself. First of all, I have a confession to make. It's true that all these awards can sometimes backfire on you. For example, recently New York Magazine voted me as one of the 100 smartest people in New York. Great honor, I thought. But in all fairness, I have to admit that Madonna also made that same list. And next year, Lady Gaga is going to push me off the list entirely, they tell me. Now today, I'm going to talk about the future of the mind. However, it's always dangerous predicting the future. Let me quote from that great philosopher of the Western world, Yogi Berra. Yogi Berra once said, quote, "Prediction is awfully hard to do, especially if it's about the future." Well, I'm a physicist. We can predict the evolution of the universe billions of years from now. So let me quote from that other great philosopher, Woody Allen. Woody Allen once said, quote, "Eternity is an awful long time, especially toward the end." Well, you may ask yourself a simple question. What does a physicist do anyway? Well, we're the ones who invented the transistor. We invented the laser. We helped to assemble the first computer and the internet. We wrote the World Wide Web. And along the way, we also invented television. We invented radio, radar, microwaves, and don't forget, we helped to create the space program. We developed the GPS system. And we physicists love to make predictions. When we helped to assemble the internet, one physicist predicted that the internet would become a forum of high culture, high art, and high society. Well, today we know that 5% of the internet is pornography. But that's because teenage boys log on to the internet. Just wait until the grandmas and grandpas log on to the internet. Then 50% of the internet will be pornography. And before I begin a discussion of the future of the mind, you may ask yourself a question, well, what is the difference? A difference between a chemist, a physicist, a geophysicist? Let me tell you a story. During World War II, the Nazis once captured a bunch of American scientists. There was a geologist, a physicist, and a chemist. And the Nazis said they're spies. They're going to be shot at the firing squad. So they put the geologists in the firing squad. The Nazis raised their rifles, and then all of a sudden the geologist said, "Earthquake! Earthquake!" Well, you can imagine the chaos. Everyone scrambled for cover, and in the chaos, the geologist snuck out. Now it was the physicist's turn. The rifles were aimed at the physicist, and he suddenly said, "Lightning! Lightning!" Well, everyone scrambled for cover, and the physicist escaped. Now it was the chemist's turn. They pointed the rifles at the chemist, and suddenly the chemist said, "Fire! Fire!" So that's the difference. Oh. So let me talk about the future. First of all, I wrote a book called Physics of the Future, and they used to say that the word physics would never enter the New York Times bestseller list. Well, I did it twice. Physics of the Impossible and Physics of the Future were both New York Times bestsellers. Physics of the Future goes 50 years, 100 years into the future, talking about the future of computers, medicine, artificial intelligence, transportation, space travel. This book actually goes 500 years into the future, when we might have time travel, starships, teleportation. And in this book, I answer the question, what happens if you go into a time machine and you visit your teenage mother before you're born, and she falls in love with you? Well, if you go into a time machine and meet your teenage mother before you're born, and she falls in love with you, you're in deep doo-doo if that happens. But today, let us talk about what's fascinated me. The two greatest mysteries in all of science deals with outer space and inner space. First, the creation of the universe, one of the greatest unsolved problems. This is what I do for a living. This is my day job. I work on something called string theory. And string theory, we think, allows us to create an equation no more than 1 inch long that will allow us to, quote, read the mind of God. But today, I'm going to talk about inner space. You see, sitting on your shoulders is the most complex object in the known universe. If we were to build a computer that can model your brain, that computer would be the size of a city block. It would consume the energy of a nuclear power plant, and it would require a river to cool it down. And yet your brain only operates on 20 watts of power. 20 watts. So when someone calls you a dim bulb, that's a compliment. And your brain works on 1 hamburger. I mean, amazing what the brain can do. And now, the politicians have gotten wind of this. President Barack Obama, last January, stunned the world when he announced the Brain Project. The European Union and the United States are going to dump $1 billion. $1 billion to map the human brain. The short-term goal is to cure mental illness. The oldest affliction of humanity, the Bible mentions mental illness. But one day, if we have the genome on one disk with all our genes on it, and the connectome with all the connections of the brain on another disk, and you die, in some sense, you live forever. Your body, the genes of your body, the neural pathways of your personality, your dreams and hopes, all of them on a disk. And then the question is, if you die, is that really the end of you? Well, let me quote from Bill Clinton. It all depends on how you define you. So, when I was a child, I was fascinated by physics, but also the mind. I used to do experiments on telepathy. I used to try real hard to read people's minds, or telekinesis, to move objects with the mind. Well, after many frustrating years, I finally came to the conclusion that true telepaths may walk the surface of the earth, but I wasn't one of them. And Hollywood, of course, has given us a glimpse into the future. Telepathy, reading minds. Telekinesis, moving objects with the mind. Recording memories, downloading memories, photographing a dream. Believe it or not, we can do all of the above. You may not know this, but in the last 5 to 10 years, we've learned more about the brain than in all of human history combined. Telepathy, telekinesis, recording memories, uploading memories, photographing a dream. You will see that today, in today's slideshow, we can do all of the above. But the movies, Hollywood is always ahead of us. We have the movie The Matrix. And in The Matrix, perhaps reality itself is nothing but an illusion uploaded into our minds. Let me ask you a question. Late at night, just before you go to sleep, have you ever had that weird feeling that maybe reality is an illusion? Maybe you're the only one that's real. Everything else is nothing but a memory uploaded into your mind. And maybe it's all a test to see whether you're smart enough to figure out that you're the only one in the universe and everything else is an illusion. Ever had that feeling? Raise your hand if you ever had that feeling. Well, you're crazy. Give me a break. You guys think you're the only one in the universe? I'm the only one in the universe. I'm in bed right now. I'm just about to go to sleep. All of this is being uploaded into my mind to see whether I'm smart enough to figure out that me being here at Politics and Prose is just an illusion. And then here's the former governor of California having the memory of being married to Sharon Stone uploaded in his mind. This is the movie Total Recall. And the movie Total Recall, for 99% of the movie, he's the good guy. You identify with Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's the good guy in the movie. And then in the final scenes of the movie, you realize that the good guy memories were uploaded. He's really the bad guy. This is the only movie I know where he's the good guy and the bad guy simultaneously. And then Iron Man, the #1 action movie last year. You realize that we can actually create Iron Man outfits guided by the mind alone. This is amazing. People who are paralyzed, can't even scratch their nose. We can now give them an Iron Man suit and they will have an exoskeleton, the gift of life once again. And now we're also looking at the possibility of robots controlled by the mind. These are surrogates, avatars. The movie Avatar, the movie Surrogates with Bruce Willis, popularized the idea. This could be the future of the space program. Space is dangerous. Just watch that movie with Sandra Bullock. Space is dangerous. Why not send a robot to the moon, guided mentally by an astronaut on Earth sitting in his hot tub? This is possible. So in other words, remote-controlled robots controlled by someone a good distance away is a possible future for the space program. And then telekinesis. Hollywood has all these tales of telekinetics, including Carrie. She had her revenge in her senior prom by destroying the entire high school. Revenge for all the slights she endured. What's the lesson here? The lesson here is never take a telekinetic to the senior prom. And then the latest Superman movie. I was shocked when I saw it. Every child knows that Superman's father died when Krypton blew up. Every kid knows that. But in this movie, they bring Superman's father back to life as Russell Crowe. So here's Russell Crowe, Superman's father, because he's really a hologram that is activated by a computer program that has all the memories, all the neural circuits, emotions of Superman's father. Is that possible? And the answer apparently is yes. And now the President of the United States has said that a national priority will be to have not just the genome, but the connectome, Brain 2.0. So if Brain 1.0 dies, i.e. us, Brain 2.0 survives. And then in Star Trek, you ask the question, what happens if the mind can be separate from the body? You know, hundreds of years ago, Descartes and the philosophers said that the mind and soul are different from the body. That's called dualism. But in the last 50 years, we began to think that maybe the mind is nothing but software running on the wetware of the brain. So mind and body are nothing but software and wetware. But now, if we have President Barack Obama's dream come true, then it means perhaps we can separate the two. Perhaps the mind can live on forever. We'll talk about that. Now, that's Hollywood. Now let's talk about what's happening in the laboratories. What's happening is that we physicists have created a new generation of instruments that can peer right into the blood flows of the living brain. We can see thoughts thoughts ricocheting like a ping pong ball right across the brain, and we can reanalyze all these old wives' tales and theories like Freudian psychology from a new light, and that is computers using instruments from physics. On the left is your brain when it tells the truth. Nothing much happens to the blood flow of the brain when you tell the truth. But when you tell a lie, when you tell a lie, first, you have to know the truth. Then you have to create the lie. Then you have to calculate the consistency of the lie with all the lies you've been telling all these years. That's a lot of brain power. Your brain lights up like a Christmas tree. So on the right is your brain when it tells a lie. And if you look at the brain, there are three basic parts of the brain. The brain is quite complicated, but there are three basic parts. And evolution gives us a guide. On the right, lower right, is the reptilian brain, the old brain. When a baby is born, a baby's brain is basically the reptilian brain. The brain goes from the back, it grows in the forward direction, mimicking evolution. So when a baby is maybe 10 years old or so, then the center part of the brain matures. That is the monkey brain, the emotional brain, the brain of social relations, etiquette, manners, the center part of the brain, the monkey brain. And then when the kid grows up, then the front part of the brain finally develops, and that's the thinking brain. So the brain basically evolves in three basic stages. Now, we can analyze old wives' tales to see whether they're true. Every parent here knows in their heart of hearts that teenagers suffer from brain damage. How else do you explain their behavior? Well, looking at brain scans, it's true. The prefrontal cortex is the last part of the brain to develop, and it is not fully developed in teenagers. Another old wives' tale is that when a man talks to a pretty girl, he starts to act stupid. It's true. You can actually see that blood drains from the prefrontal cortex when a man talks to a pretty girl, and he becomes mentally retarded. It's true. He starts to babble, okay? You can look at the blood flow, and you can numerically calculate how low his IQ is getting as he talks to a pretty girl. If you don't believe me, talk to Bill Clinton. Now, let's cut the brain in half this way. Now, touching the brain is not painful at all. The brain has no pain sensors. You can touch the brain, and the brain feels nothing because there's no pain sensors there. So the brain has a left and a right hemisphere. The left is more analytical. The right is more holistic. And for epileptics, we have to cut the link in order to stop convulsions, which can be fatal. Now, when you cut the connection between the left and the right brain, something bizarre, something mysterious begins to happen. Two separate personalities slowly develop in the same brain. This is amazing. In one situation, the left brain was an atheist, and the right brain was a believer in the same brain. And when you try to move your arms, they fight. They fight for control because each is governed by a different part of the brain. In one instance, when a man's wife came home, with one arm he embraced her, and the other arm he socked her in the jaw. It's a true story. It's amazing. You can imagine that one day we'll find an epileptic whose left brain is Republican and right brain is Democrat. And when he goes to the polling booth and has to pull down the switch, you can imagine both of them are going to fight to see who controls the polling booth. Now, back in the 1950s, this is what we did. It was clumsy. It was awkward. We put on these helmets to look at electrical activity of the brain. Not very successful at all. Today we have MRI scans. We have computers to analyze these things. So in the future, it's going to be sexy. On the upper left, already, video games are now being put via the mind. You put on a headband. The headband picks up radio from the brain. The brain is a milliwatt transmitter. And you can actually move the avatar in a video game mentally. Mentally, you can now navigate the different levels of complexity of a video game. And in the right, In the right, in Japan, this is the rage of partygoers. You put on a headband in Japan with 2 ears on it. When you talk to someone who's interesting, the ears light up. When you talk to someone who's a real dud, a real loser, then the 2 ears go like that. In the future, you will always know if you're going to go home alone at night. And I'm going to assign my students these headbands, so I will always know who to give an A and who to give an F to in my class simply by looking at their ears, okay? And again, this is the rage of Japan. And in the lower left, Apple computers and Silicon Valley, they're taking note of this because why bother to have a mouse? Why bother to have a keyboard? Why not simply have everything done mentally? You walk into a room, you have a headband, you just mentally control the lights, control the TV, surf the web, type by thinking about it. And one day our children will ask us, how could you live in a world where you had to touch the screen, touch the keyboard, touch the steering wheel? How could you live like that? Our kids will ask. And Madison Avenue has gotten wind of this. Madison Avenue says, well, at some point in the future, not today, but in the future, we're going to market this thing, and it's going to be sexy. The fashion industry will be at the forefront of this technology. And this is my colleague, Stephen Hawking. Great cosmologist. He is totally paralyzed. He cannot even move his fingers anymore. Now, we, his friends, we're all physicists. So what we did was we connected his brain to a computer. Look at his right glass. The next time you see him on television, look at his right frame. There's a chip in his right frame. That chip picks up signals from his brain, converts it to signals which goes to a laptop, and he can now communicate with the world through a computer. And in fact, at Brown University, they have one of the most advanced versions of this. You put a chip directly on top of the brain. It doesn't hurt because the brain cannot feel anything at all. It has no pain sensors. The chip is then connected to a laptop computer. So when you move your arm to the right, the computer knows to move the cursor to the right. You move your hand to the left, the cursor moves to the left. Now you do it mentally. Mentally, you move your hand to the right, and the cursor moves to the right. In this way, you build up a dictionary. This man here is totally paralyzed. He had a massive stroke. He is a vegetable. He can't even scratch his nose. He can't turn around. He is totally paralyzed, trapped in his body. So at Brown, they put a chip in his brain, shown here, connected him to a laptop computer. He can now read email, write email, do crossword puzzles, play video games, operate his wheelchair, operate household appliances, and he is totally paralyzed. And then at Brown University, they connected this woman, who's also totally paralyzed, to a mechanical robotic arm. For the first time in decades, she could reach for a Coke bottle, and she could actually feed herself, because of course everything has to be done for her. And think of all the thousands of people who get sports injuries, injuries on the football field, or they have a stroke, or they have a car accident. And the military is interested because there are thousands of wounded warriors from Iraq and Afghanistan. They have injured spinal cords, loss of arms and legs. So the military at Johns Hopkins University has now created the most advanced mechanical arm. This arm is so advanced, you can pick up an eggshell, you can shake hands without crushing the person, you can high five, you can fist bump, and it is run entirely by the mind controlling a mechanical arm. And after a while, you don't even think about it. You just mentally control the arm. And then, not only will we have mechanical arms controlled mentally, mechanical exoskeletons. At Duke University, the scientists there have made it a challenge for the next soccer games in Brazil. The man who opens the soccer cup games will be totally paralyzed wearing an exoskeleton. totally paralyzed, cannot move even a finger, and yet he will light the torch or whatever, initiating the Brazilian soccer games. That's how fast this technology is moving. And then in Japan, we have Asimo the robot, one of the world's most advanced robots, guided by a human mentally guiding the robot. Now, robots, however, as you probably know, have been rather disappointing. This is the most advanced robot in the world. Asimo can run by himself. He can walk upstairs. He can dance. He dances much better than me. I've been on a number of science specials with Asimo. So for BBC television, I put a TV camera in the face of the inventor of Asimo. And so I asked the inventor of the world's most advanced robot, how smart is your creation? And he said on camera that Asimo, the world's most advanced robot, has the intelligence of a cockroach, a retarded cockroach, a lobotomized, stupid, retarded cockroach. We have a long ways to go. So why don't we hook them up to a human? We already have people. So this is a remote-controlled robot. These are called surrogates, and you will find them in the classroom. These surrogates are designed to be in the classroom, so the teacher sees your face in the robot, the surrogate. Meanwhile, you are at home, sick, watching the teacher in a laptop computer. Now, remember when we were young, we used to play hooky, right? I mean, come on, fess up, right? When we were young, we used to play hooky, right? Well, isn't the future wonderful? You'll never be able to play hooky again. The teacher will know exactly where you are any particular day because you're surrogate. Your surrogate with your picture will be right there in your seat. And then the eye is directly connected to the brain, so why not input information via your contact lens? This is the future of the internet. We already have prototypes of this, internet contact lenses. You blink and you are online. And who are the first people to buy internet contact lenses? College students taking final examinations. They will blink and they will be online. And who's the second person to buy internet contact lenses? Well, politicians like Vice President Joe Biden, so he's always on message and never says anything goofy anymore because the script is right there in his contact lenses. And these contact lenses will also recognize people's faces. So the next time you're on a date at Match.com and the guy says that he's divorced, he's a millionaire, and so on and so forth, well, you'll see a biography right next to his name that he's basically homeless. And if they speak Chinese to you, your contact lens will translate Chinese into English. This is what we physicists and engineers are creating, contact lenses that recognize people's faces and translate Chinese or whatever into English. Now, think about it. Let's say you're at a cocktail party, and you know there's some very important people at that cocktail party, but you don't know who they are. In the future, you will always know exactly who to suck up to at any cocktail party. You'll see their biography right there in your contact lens. So these are surrogates, that is, mentally guided robots. They will eventually, we think, colonize the solar system and handle dangerous jobs like firemen, policemen jobs. This is coming. So this is called artificial prosthetics, computerized prosthetics, when we digitalize different parts of the body. And then, in the movie The Matrix, you learn karate by pushing a button. Is that possible? Uploading memories was done last year for the first time in world history. We recorded a memory, and we reinserted and uploaded that same memory, and it works. Here's how we did it. On the upper left, on that red dot, you see the hippocampus. That's where memories are formed. If you damage your hippocampus, you cannot remember anything. You forget as soon as someone talks to you. You basically relive that same conversation over and over and over again. There's a movie about that, 50 First Dates with Drew Barrymore. It's based on a true story. Also, Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. These are true instances of people who have damage to the hippocampus. So, at Wake Forest University in North Carolina, they took a mouse, trained the mouse to sip from a bottle of water. Then they recorded the message that is whizzing through the hippocampus. Then the mouse later forgot the task. Then they reinserted that memory into the hippocampus, and bingo, the mouse remembered immediately. So, at MIT, they did the same thing. They duplicated it at MIT and even inserted a false memory into a mouse. The next goal is primates. They're going to be tape recording, for example, a monkey eating a banana, for example. They'll tape record it and then reinsert it perhaps into another monkey. And then the short-term goal is a pacemaker, a brain pacemaker for Alzheimer's patients. That's the short-term goal. Think of the millions of people who will have Alzheimer's, wandering the streets, not knowing where they live, not knowing who they are. We're going to have on the upper right a brain pacemaker. You push a button, and it uploads the memory into your hippocampus. And then beyond that, who knows? Maybe you can upload the vacation that you never had. Or Arnold Schwarzenegger will upload the marriage that he never had. Okay? The implications are incredible. College students will be able to take all the courses they flunked when they were in college. Workers will be able to upgrade their skill sets as automation gradually takes over many jobs. And if that's not amazing, we can actually photograph a thought. This was once considered impossible, and now we do it at Berkeley, where I got my PhD years and years ago. What we do is we put the brain in an MRI scan, and we analyze blood flow. We calculate 30,000 dots, and then we analyze these dots with a computer to create a picture. Now, this is an MRI machine on the left. They are huge, gigantic. You cannot put one in your living room because it would collapse the floor. But on the right is the world's smallest MRI machine. It is the size of a briefcase. And how small can you make an MRI machine? Believe it or not, according to the laws of physics, the smallest MRI machine is this big. You will have in your cell phone the power to see inside your body. You will have more power in your cell phone than in a modern university hospital. So what do we do with it? We take the brain, analyze blood flow, create 30,000 dots, which is not very much. A picture has maybe 1 million pixels. So we take these 30,000 dots, put it into a computer, and bingo, a picture emerges. These are some of the first pictures ever taken of a thought. On the upper left is when you look at a picture of Steve Martin. Next to it is a computer recreation of the thinking process of the mind deciphered by computers. And you can see that it's not perfect. Well, hey, it's only 30,000 pixels. A typical picture would have hundreds of thousands to millions of pixels. And you can clearly make out animals, people's faces, airplanes, and then when you go to sleep in the MRI machine, which is rather difficult, but if you go to sleep in the MRI machine, it prints out a picture of your dream. And in Germany, they did the first experiments on lucid dreaming. Another old wives' tale. Lucid dreaming is when you are awake when you dream. You know you are dreaming as you dream. You can actually change the direction of your dream. How many people in this room have had an episode of lucid dreaming where you were dreaming and you knew you were dreaming? Raise your hand. Well, that's an old wives' tale, right? We proved it. At Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, Germany, they took a lucid dreamer, put in him an MRI scan as he dreamed, and sure enough, he could control the direction of his dream. He was awake while he was dreaming. One day, you'll wake up in the morning, push the videotape button, and you'll see the dream you had last night. And of course, if you have a second wife, hopefully the first wife's name will not pop up in that videotape. Could cause problems. And why is President Barack Obama making such a big deal about this? because the short-term goal is to cure mental illness. About 15% of humanity at some point or other has some kind of mental breakdown, the most severe being schizophrenia. It turns out that many household names, movie stars, actors, actresses, composers, great artists, all of them suffer from bouts of mental illness. On the upper left is Margot Kidder, who played Lois Lane in the Superman movies. You probably read that a few years ago she was found homeless, stark naked, hiding behind some trash cans, cringing behind some trash cans. She suffered from bipolar disorder. Catherine Zeta-Jones. The list goes on and on and on. Now, we put these people in a brain scan, and we actually can see how the brain malfunctions. If you put a schizophrenic who hears voices in a brain scan, the left part of the brain, the left temporal lobe, lights up. That's what happens when you talk to yourself. When you talk to yourself, the left part of the brain lights up. But the front part of the brain, the thinking brain, is aware of that fact. In these people, the left part of the brain generates voices, but the front part of the brain is unaware of it. They are not aware of the fact that they are talking to themselves. So if one day you all of a sudden have a voice in your mind without your permission, you call that madness, right? Well, that's what madness is. When the front part of the brain does not talk to the left part of the brain, that is called madness. And one day we will perhaps cure some of these and even understand history. History, even the Bible mentions mental illness. Joan of Arc is one of the great legendary figures from our history books. A teenager who changes European history. An amazing story. She thought that she talked to God. Well, psychologists have since then said that maybe she suffered from hyper-religiosity. If you go to a hospital where we have stroke victims, epileptics, people with epileptic lesions right about here, about 10-20% of them have hyper-religiosity. They see demons and ghosts everywhere. If it rains, it's because a ghost or a spirit was punishing you. We think that perhaps she suffered from this, and we can actually artificially duplicate it with radio. We physicists have created a helmet, the God helmet. You put on the God helmet, it shoots radio into that part of the brain, and you have rapture, religious rapture. You think you're in the presence of great spirits. You become hyper religious putting on the God helmet. So, to test the God helmet, we put two people inside. One was an atheist, and the other one was a nun. The atheist we chose was Richard Dawkins. Yes, we put Richard Dawkins in the God helmet, zapped his brain. He had rapture all of a sudden, communicating with the great gods. And we put a nun to see whether we can change their religious point of view. Well, afterwards, Richard Dawkins said, he's still an atheist. But the nun said, God created us with a radio connecting us to heaven. God meant it to be that way. You know, you can't win. You can't change people's point of view. But for me, perhaps the most fascinating thing about the brain is super geniuses. We walk the surface of the earth with geniuses that are off scale, artistically, musically, and mathematically. This man here can take a helicopter ride over Hong Kong, London, or Manhattan, one helicopter ride, and draw the entire landscape of Hong Kong, London, and Manhattan from memory. You know, some of us have a hard time drawing a stick figure, right? This guy can draw the entire Manhattan skyline. If you want to see it, go to Kennedy Airport, Terminal 1, American Airlines. Look up, and you'll see a mural. It's about 50 feet long. The entire Manhattan skyline with all the lights and skyscrapers and bridges from memory. And it turns out that there's a case of a young boy. A bullet went right through his left temporal lobe. Also, a man who dove into a swimming pool bashed the left part of his brain on the bottom of a swimming pool. Both of them later emerged as super mathematical geniuses. They could perform mathematical operations that even a supercomputer would have a hard time duplicating. Now, tonight, after today's lecture, do not pick up a hammer. Do not bash yourself with the left temporal lobe, hoping to become a super mathematical genius. But, we brain scan these people. We have brain scans of these people. Kim Peek, who actually died a few years ago, was the basis for the movie Rain Man with Tom Cruise. Kim Peek memorized 15,000 books. He could recite the exact page and tell you each page of the 15,000 books that he memorized. And when he read a book, he read the left page and the right page simultaneously. Try that right after today's lecture. Open up a book and try to read the left page and the right page simultaneously. Well, we brain scanned Kim Peek's brain. His brain was quite unusual, obviously. The left and the right hemispheres, the connection was cut again. And so that's why he was able to read 2 pages simultaneously. He literally had 2 brains inside one. And then, who was the greatest scientific genius of all time? According to Albert Einstein, it was Sir Isaac Newton. Sir Isaac Newton was a very strange man. He was incapable of small talk. He could not chit-chat with you. He had no friends, no girlfriends, no men friends, just no friends at all. You would not want to invite him for dinner. And if you want to see people like this, just watch The Big Bang Theory on CBS television. Clueless with women, totally socially awkward. This is called Asperger's syndrome. The creator of mechanics, the universal law of gravitation. Paul Dirac, the creator of quantum field theory. Both of them, we think, suffer from Asperger's syndrome. I interviewed one of these people for my radio show, Daniel Tammet. He memorized pi to about 15,000 decimal places. It took him about 8 hours. 8 hours, 3.1419. I mean, I can't go beyond that. He just went on going for 8 hours, right? So I asked Daniel, how do you do it? How do you memorize 15,000 decimal places? And he says, oh, it's easy. I just associate a color with every digit. And I said, well, that's nice. How do you memorize 15,000 colors? And he said he really didn't know. Now, this is called eidetic memory. We've analyzed these people. Television specials have been done about them. We have a theory about them. You see, every textbook says that the brain records, but then memories dissolve with time. Given time, memories fall apart and decay. Every textbook says that. Now, maybe we don't believe that anymore. Some people now believe that forgetting is a very precise biochemical process. So the brain records, and then the brain erases. In these people, the erase button is broken. In other words, they have forgotten how to forget. Remember, all the theories of super geniuses relies upon the memorizing process. They must have incredible memorizing abilities. No, it's not that at all. We now believe that it's the forgetting process. These people don't forget. They remember exactly what they were doing 30 years ago, May 2nd, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So why don't we have it? We have this capability. We're genetically almost identical to these people. We have this capability. But you see, evolution gave us the erase button because it is actually bothersome to have this photographic memory. One woman in Los Angeles, you probably saw her on television, they interviewed her. She sees a split screen. One part of the screen is today as it evolves. The other is a day 30 years ago that she is reliving second by second. And it's annoying. For her, it's annoying. However, I wouldn't mind having that capability doing a calculation or in college. And then Einstein, the greatest genius of modern times. Believe it or not, his brain is still with us. When he died in 1955, unknown to everybody, the doctor held Einstein's brain in his hand, and he had this existential shock, realizing that he had in his hand the greatest genius of modern times, a certified genius. What did he do? He put it inside a bottle and put it in his living room for 30 years. He kept it in a cooler in his living room. He drove across country, put Einstein's brain in a mayonnaise jar, and took it all the way to Berkeley. Well, the brain is now at Princeton. And you can actually see the brain. There have been a number of specials on it. The brain is different. And in the book, I won't go into the details, it actually analyzes Einstein's brain. And then, if we have all these knowledge of the thinking brain, why not reanalyze Sigmund Freud? Freud had all these bizarre theories of Oedipus complex and superego and ego and id, libido, right? Well, now we can. We can now actually see the libido, the superego, and the id at work as blood flows ricocheting across the brain. For example, the pleasure center, the libido, we found it. It's called the nucleus accumbens. It's dead center inside the brain. And if you take a mouse and put 2 electrodes in the mouse's nucleus accumbens, the pleasure center, and hook it up to a telegraph key that the mouse can then tap, the mouse will hit the telegraph key, exciting its pleasure center, twice a second until it dies of starvation. So they next took a dog and a cat. Finally, they went up to a dolphin. The dolphin could swim forward, hit an electrode, and excite its own pleasure center. The dolphin would then hit it a few times a second until it realized, I am dying. I will die. At that point, the dolphin stopped, got some food, and then came back. Dolphin's not stupid. Well, I'm going to try to wrap up because I want to get to signing your books. But consciousness, I also have a discussion of consciousness. I think that you can numerically rank consciousness. You know, there have been 20,000 papers written about consciousness by poets, musicians, philosophers, scientists. 20,000 papers written about consciousness. Never in the history of science have so many written so much to produce so little. Well, I give a numerical ranking. I'm a physicist. We like to rank everything, give numbers for everything. And I believe that even animals are conscious. Most scientists would say that only humans are conscious. In fact, that's the dominant point of view. Only humans are conscious. I'm a physicist, not a biologist. We believe in continuums. So animals like cats and dogs, I think, are conscious, except they have a different kind of consciousness. For example, how many people here in this room have a cat? Raise your hand. Oh, quite a few, right? Well, when you come home, doesn't the cat come up to you and purr and rub next to your leg? And you say, oh, nice putty tat. And then the cat goes, huh, and then stomps off by itself. Ever notice that? Well, if you could brain scan the cat's mind, you would have a totally different point of view. When you come home, the cat says, I have to mark this human with my hormone. So it's marking its property. I own this human. Other cats, stay away. This is my property. I've trained this human to feed me twice a day. I trained this human. Good human. Good human. And why does the cat go off by itself? Because the cat is descended from the wild cat. It's a solitary hunter. Its brain architecture is for not packs, but solitary hunting. That's why the cat goes, huh, and goes by itself after rubbing itself on you. Now, how many people here have a dog? Whoa, even more. Well, the dog is descended from Canis lupus, the gray wolf. Its brain would be full of smells and scents rather than sight like our brain. And why does it slobber all over you when you come home? Because the dog thinks that you are a dog. You are top dog. You are the alpha dog. Because what holds the pack together? The alpha dog holds the pack together. Every dog knows exactly where it stands in the hierarchy. Top dog eats first, beta dog eats second, and delta dog eats last. That's why you eat first, okay? So the next time you eat first at the dinner table and give those scraps to the dog, that's the order of things. That's the brain's pecking order. So you see, I think that even animals have consciousness. In fact, I will go even further and say that the unit of consciousness is one feedback loop. One unit of consciousness, like a thermostat. I believe that a machine is conscious. A thermostat has one unit of consciousness. A plant may have 10 units of consciousness. It registers temperature, it registers moisture, salinity, sunlight, direction of gravity. A plant may have 10 units. And then the back of the brain is the ancient brain, the reptilian brain. I call that level 1 consciousness. Alligators understand their position in space, not much more. And then as you go forward in evolution, you get the monkey brain, the social brain, the brain of pecking orders, emotions, social hierarchy, manners. That's level 2 consciousness. And why are we different from animals? I say we are different from animals because we plan for the future. Animals do not. Animals have no concept of tomorrow. If you have a dog, train your dog to understand tomorrow. And you will find you cannot. Animals, for the most part, live for the moment. We plan, we scheme, we strategize. We can't help it. Now, you may say to yourself, let's say I don't believe in your theory. There must be something outside your theory, like humor, a joke. A joke is so ephemeral. How can you possibly rank a joke? Well, I can. You see, when you hear a joke, first you hear the joke, and then you complete the ending by yourself. You have no choice. Your brain constantly completes the future, and then when the future is different from what you thought, it's funny. For example, Teddy Roosevelt's daughter, who was one of the leaders of the gossip community in the White House, she once said, quote, "If you have nothing good to say about somebody, then please come sit next to me." And W.C. Fields was once asked, "Are you in favor of social activities for youth?" And then W.C. Fields says, "Am I in favor of clubs for youth? Yes, but only if kindness fails." And then the Bible says, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, except do it first." Now, why are these, quote, funny? Because your mother told you that if you have nothing good to say about somebody, don't say anything at all. And so when you hear the twist that "come sit next to me," it's funny because you can't help it. Your brain predicts the future. And when there's a twist at the end, it is, quote, funny. And evolution gave us this ability because in the forest, there are many unexpected things that happen. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to skip the discussion of robots. But as I said before, President Barack Obama wants to create Brain 2.0, a disk with all the connections of our brain, and maybe mental illness will be revealed as a miswiring of the brain. For example, bipolar disorder. Some of our greatest artists had bipolar disorder. We think that the left brain and the right brain are slightly different. One is pessimistic, one is optimistic, and the two check each other because the two halves are connected. But in these people, the connection is faulty. You swing between pessimism and optimism. We think that's bipolar disorder. And then one day, the internet will become a brain net. That is, emotions, feelings, sensations will be sent on the internet because we can record these things now. Teenagers will go crazy on Facebook. Teenagers already put happy faces. They put little squiggles trying to denote emotions. In the future, teenagers will send the feeling of their first kiss, the first date, the first senior prom on Facebook. They will go crazy on the internet. Now, let me end on one last note, and that is in the far future. Now we're getting into science fiction. Everything up to now has been science fact. In science fiction, we talk about the mind exploring the universe. Well, if we have the connectome, then why not put the connectome on a laser beam and shoot the laser beam at the speed of light into outer space? This could be the cheapest way to explore the universe. No booster rockets. You ever see the movie Gravity with Sandra Bullock? No space accidents, no cosmic rays, just pure light beams carrying our connectome into outer space. And now, what I'm going to do is close and then take a few questions. Then I'll sign your books. And remember, after I sign your book, you can go to eBay and make money. Okay? That's right. My signed books actually make money. You can make money tonight. Okay? So, let me end on one final story. When I was a child, my role model was Albert Einstein. And my favorite Einstein story is this. When Einstein was an old man, he was tired of giving the same talk over and over again. So one day his chauffeur came up to him, and the chauffeur said, "Professor, I'm really a part-time actor. I've heard your speech so many times I've memorized it. So why don't we switch places? I will put on a mustache. I will put on a wig. You will put on a chauffeur's hat and jacket. And I will be the great Einstein, and you can be my chauffeur." Well, this went along famously until one day, a mathematician in the back asked a very difficult question. And Einstein thought, oh, the game is up. But then the chauffeur said, "That question is so elementary that even my chauffeur here can answer it for you." Thank you very much. You've been a great audience. And we'll take a few questions. We have a microphone right here. And after that, you can make some money, okay? So we have two microphones, right? Okay. Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, I actually had a question, kind of relating to 2 points that you brought up. You were talking about actually implanting microchips into the brain, and then being able to record personalities and whatnot. And you were also talking about the neurological problems that so many of these savants had. And I was wondering if you had an opinion about future advancements toward technology. Do you think there's any possibility of simulating those savant-like abilities in our own consciousness, using that technology to regulate those, so that maybe it's not so detrimental to day-to-day life?
Okay, the question is it possible using this technology to maybe switch on or off savant capabilities? Well, we are finding more and more about how the brain is being wired. For example, out-of-body experiences. We can actually create out-of-body experiences like in a light switch. When you open the brain of an epileptic and you look at the juncture between two parts of the brain, the visual part and the motor part, and excite the boundary between them, the brain gets confused and you have out-of-body experiences. So we can actually induce out-of-body experiences like turning on a light switch. And then near-death experiences. We can actually duplicate near-death experiences. What happens is pilots who are in an ultracentrifuge, they're exposed to many G-forces, blood drains from the brain, and blood drains from the outside of their vision, so their peripheral vision contracts, creating a tunnel with the light at the end of the tunnel. So we can actually create out-of-body experiences, and you don't have to write a New York Times bestseller and have a TV series devoted to your out-of-body experience and near-death experience. We can duplicate that in the laboratory. Now, for savant behavior, that requires something different. We think that's because their erase mechanism is broken. That is biochemical. And that is probably at some level genetic. We don't yet know. In fact, in the book, I give you the latest data about how we think the erase mechanism is broken. We can't do that artificially yet. We can do a lot of things, but we're just at the boundary now of beginning to understand savant behavior. We're not there yet. Okay, next.
Hi. First of all, I want to give you a standing ovation. You're awesome.
Oh, well, thank you.
This might be wishful thinking, but I had a border collie years ago who could, in advance, the other dog wasn't quite as smart, and he wanted to play with him, so in advance he would bring a toy within so many feet of the other dog, and he's setting up play like a minute in advance. And I was hoping that was, even as a proto version of possibly predicting the future, was setting up a future event.
Yeah, well, animals can see the future a little bit. For example, a hunter. A hunter has to have camouflage, stalk, hide in the bushes, anticipate the motion of the prey. But most of that is still instinctual, and it's only seeing the future maybe like a half an hour into the future. We can see and plan decades, centuries into the future. Even after we're dead, we can still plan for the future after we're gone. Animals cannot plan beyond tomorrow. Now, they do plan, but for example, when they hibernate, it's mainly instinctive. It gets cold, Their sensors say that it's time to hibernate, time to eat a lot, and then go to sleep. They don't plan to winterize their home, pack up their bags, and get winter clothes, right? We do. So there is a little bit of planning because I believe in a continuum of consciousness. So animals will plan to a degree, but not beyond tomorrow, I think.
Okay, real quick second part question. If you could make an animal smarter by inserting into the animal's brain a chip, you think that may ever happen one day?
Well, in my book, I have a whole chapter about Planet of the Apes. Is it possible to take a chimpanzee and make him intelligent?
Okay.
We are 98.5% genetically identical to a chimpanzee. So we have now sequenced all the genes separating us from a chimpanzee. And sure enough, we found the ASPM gene, which actually exploded our cranium. We found the gene for dexterity of the fingers. We found the gene for vocal cords so they can articulate speech, all of which is important for becoming intelligent. And we also found the gene for upright behavior to free up your arms. Now, if you take a chimpanzee and genetically modify them to have a bigger brain size, better dexterity with the hands, better vocal cord, upright posture, what do you get? You get a human. So we already have them, right? Just like outside. So we don't have to turn chimpanzees to humans. We can do it now because we have found the genes that separate us from the chimpanzees. But we already have lots of humans. So I think there's not going to be much interest in that. Okay. But it is an ethical question that you raise. At Harvard, for example, they realized that we have now found the genome for the Neanderthal. And so they estimate that for $30 million, you can probably bring a Neanderthal baby back to life again. Okay, they even worked out the details of how they might do it. But then there's an ethical question. If you have a Neanderthal baby, do you put him at Harvard or a zoo? I mean, the mind boggles at these kind of ethical questions, yeah?
So the surrogates for exploring outer space sound very interesting, but isn't there like a fundamental limitation, which is the speed of light?
That's right.
Cause delayed reactions with moving them?
Yeah, it takes about a little over a second for you to communicate with an astronaut on the moon. So going to the moon via surrogates is ideal because there's only a second delay. Now Mars is up to 20-minute delay. So it's not such a good thing going to Mars because of the speed of light. There is a delay problem. But again, for most operations, near-Earth operations in space, space station, space shuttle, the moon, the speed of light is not such a big deal there. And that's why we think that surrogates could become the pioneers for outer space. For example, it costs $10,000 a pound to put you in orbit. That is your weight in gold. Imagine your body made out of solid gold. That's what it costs to put you into outer space. Why does it cost so much? Because of life support. Life support uses up most of the valuable ingredients to put you on the moon. To put you on the moon costs about $100,000 a pound. To put you on Mars is about $1 million a pound. That is your weight in diamonds. Okay? So now you begin to realize that, hey, maybe we don't need life support. Maybe robots don't complain. They don't sue you. They're not unionized, and they don't have to come back. So that's a tremendous bonus. Yeah. Next. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Just.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm a fourth grader and I'm studying memory, but in my class, but wouldn't if you had like, you could think and it would compute something, wouldn't there be so many levels of thoughts that it might compute the wrong thing? I mean, I'm having trouble with the voice thing where you say hi and it computes this. So, how would we do?
Well, you're absolutely right. People who have trained their brain to operate an arm, it's like riding a bicycle. You have to learn a whole new vocabulary. You have to think a certain thing like, moving an arm that you don't have, and all of a sudden the mechanical arm starts to move. So, however, monkeys that have been hooked up, they eventually treat the arm as if it was their own. If you see videotapes, you see monkeys just grabbing a banana, eating a banana with their mechanical arm, not even thinking about it. It's just part of their body. And of course, at the beginning, it is painful. It takes several hours. It takes several hours to master these things. So you're right. One thought may have the wrong consequence. But after a while, it becomes second nature, like riding a bicycle. You don't even think about it. You just think, and all of a sudden the mechanical arm and leg does what you want it to do. But it's only at the beginning is it very clumsy, okay?
Like you think,
Yeah.
I wish he was dead, and all of a sudden your arm's like,
Yeah. Yeah, like Iron Man, right? Okay. Oh, last question. Then I'll sign your book. Okay, last question.
Are you familiar with the Mars One project at all?
Well, why don't you tell people?
Okay, so the Mars One project is essentially a privatized mission for humans to get onto space in 2022 or 2024, I believe. And they're never going to come back. The thing is, they're going to stay there forever, and there's no chance of them coming back, basically. And they're planning on televising this, sort of like the world's biggest reality show on who's going to get to go to this on this thing. So my question to you is, it's sort of offbeat, but what do you think about that? Obviously, a surrogate would probably be the better choice there, but I just can't believe that they're.
First observation: you're not going to get me on one of those things.
No, no.
A one-way ticket to Mars.
Yeah. I can't believe that people are like tens of thousands of people have applied to become a part of this thing.
Well, they want to go down in the history books
I
permanently.
Guess so. I can't.
But a surrogate would, as mentioned here, have a bit of a problem. It takes up to 20 minutes for radio to go from the Earth to Mars and then back again, 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's an awful long time for a command for a robot. The Mars rover has this problem. The Mars rover is guided by people with a joystick. And yeah, there's a 20-minute delay going forward and backward. So you got to be very careful so you don't make a left turn and 20 minutes later it goes in a ditch. So you have to be careful when you do this. But yeah, personally, I think that surrogates is the cheapest, most economical way to explore the solar system. Mm-hmm. And personally, I think that even though people sign up for a one-way ticket to Mars, what happens if they change their mind? You know,
the thing I wonder about is the psychological implications of a few people spending a lifetime together on a desolate planet. We have
not even a lifetime. Your oxygen runs out.
Yeah.
See that movie with Sandra Bullock. Okay. Well, I think.